This isn't what it looks like. The door was still half open. A man's jacket lay on the sofa. And somewhere behind Jane's trembling voice, another presence breathed, unafraid, unhidden. Hooper's suitcase slipped from his fingers and cracked open at his feet. Some surprises don't arrive with smiles. They arrive to end the version of love you thought was safe. If you've ever trusted someone enough to fly across the world for them, don't look away. Hooper Vale had learned how to love without interrupting. At 37, he lived in the margins of his own marriage, not unloved, not unwanted, just postponed. He was the man who reheated dinners alone, who paused movies halfway through because Jane might call, who celebrated victories that weren't his as if they were. The morning he decided to fly to Geneva, the house felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful. Hollow. Jane had left 3 days earlier for what she'd called a short business trip. A summit. Meetings. Investors. The usual language of her life now. She'd kissed his cheek absent-mindedly, already scrolling through emails, already elsewhere. She hadn't called since. Hooper stood in the kitchen staring at his phone, thumb hovering where her name should have been lighting up his screen. Nothing. No missed calls. No voice notes whispered from hotel rooms. Not even a tired, "I'm alive." He told himself this was normal. She was a millionaire now. People waited for her decisions. Countries adjusted to her schedules. Silence had become part of loving her. Still, something inside him refused to settle. Not suspicion. Distance. He looked at the carry-on bag leaning against the counter. The thought came quietly, without drama. Go to her. Not to accuse. Not to check. Just to remind her, remind them, that before the headlines, before the glass towers and closed doors, there had been 2 people who chose each other without witnesses. He zipped the bag slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might scare the resolve away. "She'll smile," he murmured. "She always does when she's surprised." But the smile didn't reach his eyes. He booked the flight 10 minutes later. Economy. Overnight. Window seat. As the plane climbed through the clouds, Hooper rested his forehead against the glass, watching the city lights dissolve into darkness. He thought about the first apartment they'd shared. About the nights Jane fell asleep on his chest while whispering dreams she was too afraid to say out loud in daylight. "You promised we'd grow together," he said quietly, not sure who he was talking to anymore. If you've ever been the one who loved quietly, without demands, without ultimatums, this story is for you. Stay. In Geneva, Jane Vale stood in front of a mirror that reflected success back at her flawlessly. The penthouse suite was immaculate, cream marble floors, glass walls overlooking the city, luxury so seamless it felt unreal. She adjusted the collar of her tailored midnight blue dress, expression composed, spine straight. At 35, Jane Vale was a self-made millionaire whose instincts shifted markets and unsettled powerful men. She was decisive, respected, feared. Everything she'd once prayed to become. And yet, as she stared at her reflection, an ache pressed behind her ribs. Her phone vibrated on the marble counter. Not Hooper. A message appeared. "The car's downstairs. Don't overthink tonight." Jane exhaled slowly. She hadn't meant to ignore Hooper. She told herself that every hour. Time just slipped away inside boardrooms and negotiations. Marriage became something she postponed until after this deal, after this trip, after this milestone. Hooper's name sat unsent in her drafts. She picked up the phone. Put it down again. "After tonight," she whispered to her reflection. "I'll call him after tonight." But even she heard the lie in her voice. Success had taught her how to win, not how to stay. By the time Hooper landed, Geneva was waking under pale morning light. Clean streets. Foreign calm. He checked into a modest hotel across the river, close enough to reach her, far enough not to intrude. He didn't text. He wanted the surprise to be pure. That afternoon, he walked past the glass tower hosting Jane's summit, watching executives move with purpose. Jane belonged in that world now. He knew it. He respected it. But respect didn't erase loneliness. As evening approached, Hooper changed his shirt, smoothed his hair, and practiced nothing. Love, he believed, shouldn't need rehearsal. The cab ride to her hotel felt longer than it should have. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, the hallway was silent, plush carpet swallowing sound, warm lighting hiding shadows. Hooper stopped outside suite 2704. Smiled. Lifted his hand. And knocked. No answer. He knocked again, lighter. Then he heard it. A laugh. Male. Low. Comfortable. Hooper's hand froze midair. The door handle turned from the inside. And in the split second before it opened, a truth settled into his chest like a slow, inevitable crack. Whatever waited behind that door, this marriage would never sound the same again. If you were standing where Hooper stands now, would you still want the door to open? The door opened slowly. Not all the way, just enough. Jane Vale stood there barefoot on cream marble, her hair loose in a way Hooper hadn't seen in years. Not styled. Not controlled. Just undone. Her eyes widened the moment they met his. Hooper. For half a second, relief flickered across her face. Then panic swallowed it whole. You, her voice cracked. You weren't supposed to be here. The words landed harder than any accusation ever could. Hooper didn't move. He didn't speak. His mind refused to catch up with what his eyes were already cataloging. The unfamiliar jacket draped over the back of the sofa behind her, the second glass on the table with condensation still sliding down its side, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't his. A presence. Not hidden. Not ashamed. Jane stepped out into the hallway instinctively, pulling the door closer behind her, as if distance could undo what had already been seen. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" she asked too quickly. Hooper swallowed. His throat burned. "I wanted to surprise you," he said. "You stopped calling." That was the moment her composure broke. Her shoulders stiffened. Her gaze darted away from him, just for a beat. Long enough. Inside the suite, a man laughed softly. Unbothered. Familiar. Hooper felt something inside him tilt. "Jane," he said quietly. "Who's in there?" Silence. Not the gentle kind. The kind that screams without sound. Jane's lips parted, closed, parted again. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. "It's not what it looks like." Hooper nodded once, slowly, as if accepting instructions to breathe. "Then tell me what it is." She didn't answer. The door behind her opened wider. A man stepped into view. Tall. Confident. Shirt half-buttoned. Not startled. Not apologetic. He looked at Hooper like a man who had already been chosen. "Hey," the man said calmly, extending a hand that never quite reached Hooper. "I'm Lucien." Jane turned sharply. "Lucien." Hooper didn't hear the rest. The hallway felt too bright. Too narrow. His suitcase slipped from his fingers and burst open on the carpet. Shirts, socks, the small wrapped gift he'd picked up at the airport sliding out like evidence. Lucien glanced down at it, then back at Jane. "You didn't say he was flying in," he said mildly. Jane flinched. Hooper laughed then. It surprised even him. A short, hollow sound. "So that's how it is," he said. "I'm a scheduling conflict now." Jane reached for him instinctively. He stepped back. "Don't," he said, not loudly but firmly. "Just don't." Her eyes filled. "Hooper, please. Let me explain." He shook his head, slowly. "You had days," he said. "Weeks. You had silence." That was the explanation. Lucien shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. "Jane, maybe I should." "No," she snapped. Then softer, "Stay." The word cut deeper than any betrayal could. Hooper straightened. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "I came because I missed my wife." Jane's breath hitched. "I am your wife," she whispered. "Are you?" he asked gently. That question shattered something in her. "You don't understand what my life is like now," she said, voice rising. "The pressure. The expectations. I can't just pause." Hooper nodded. "I know," he said. "That's why I learned how to wait." The words hung between them. Lucien looked away. Hooper bent down and gathered the spilled contents of his suitcase with careful hands. He picked up the small wrapped box last. Turned it over once. "I brought you this," he said, placing it on the console table near the door. "It's stupid. You don't need it." Jane stared at it like it might explode. "What is it?" she asked. A piece of a cathedral I restored, he said. Old stone. They were throwing it away. I thought, maybe you'd like something that lasted. Jane covered her mouth. Hooper. He stepped past her, stopping only long enough to look at her one last time. I hope he knows, Hooper said softly, nodding toward Lucien, that you don't break things on purpose. You just stop coming back to fix them. Lucien's jaw tightened. Hooper turned and walked down the hallway without another word. Jane didn't follow. She stood frozen in the doorway, the wrapped stone still untouched. Only when the elevator doors closed at the end of the hall did she sink to the floor. Lucien spoke gently. Jane, are you okay? She shook her head. No, she whispered. I think I just lost the one person who ever loved me when I had nothing. Outside, Hooper stepped into the cool Geneva night. He didn't cry. He simply stood there, chest tight, realization settling in slow and brutal. Some surprises don't bring people closer. They reveal how far apart you already are. If you've ever waited for someone who stopped waiting for you, you know how this feels. Stay. Some wounds only begin to heal when they're fully seen. Hooper didn't go back to his hotel right away. He walked. Geneva at night was calm in a way that felt almost mocking, street lamps glowing softly, couples laughing outside cafes, the river reflecting light without distortion. The world was intact. Only he felt fractured. He stopped at the edge of the bridge and rested his hands on the cold railing. You didn't imagine it, he told himself. You saw what you saw. And yet, his mind kept trying to sand the edges off the moment. Jane's panic. Her bare feet. The way she'd said his name first, before fear took over. The way she hadn't chased him, but hadn't closed the door either. It's not what it looks like. The words circled him like vultures. Hooper pressed his eyes shut. No, he said out loud. It looked exactly like what it was. Still, resistance is a quiet thing. It doesn't roar. It bargains. Maybe it just started. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe you should have come sooner. The last thought lodged deepest. For years, Hooper had told himself patience was love. That giving space was respect. That not asking too much was maturity. He had mistaken endurance for devotion, and now his restraint felt like complicity. He checked his phone. Nothing. He didn't expect a message. But the emptiness still stung. Across the city, Jane Vale sat alone on the cold marble floor of the penthouse suite, her back against the sofa, knees pulled to her chest like a woman half her age. Lucien had left. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly, after a long pause, after one look at her face that told him this was already over. I'll give you space, he'd said. You look like someone who just woke up. Jane hadn't responded. Now she stared at the small wrapped box on the console table. She hadn't opened it. She was afraid if she did, something irreversible would break. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she told herself. I didn't plan this. She stood and paced the suite, heels clicking sharply against the floor like accusations. Her mind reached for defenses the way it always did: logic, pressure, responsibility. I'm under constant scrutiny, I can't afford weakness. Hooper doesn't understand this world. But another voice, quieter, more dangerous, rose beneath the excuses. He understands you. Jane stopped pacing. She thought about the early years, when Hooper stayed up late sketching restoration plans while she studied financial models at the same table. When success was a dream, not a wall. When he believed in her before anyone else did. She sank onto the sofa and finally picked up the box. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Inside lay a smooth fragment of old stone, pale and worn, its edges softened by centuries. Time made visible. Endurance without noise. Jane pressed it to her chest and broke. Across the city, Hooper sat on the edge of his hotel bed, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. Jane. His thumb hovered. Then he turned the phone face down. Not yet, he told himself. If I answer now, I'll fold. He needed truth. Not apologies shaped by fear of loss. Not explanations that asked him to keep waiting. Silence stretched between them, thick, deliberate, defensive. Two people refusing to be the first to bleed. If you've ever stayed silent because speaking felt like surrender, you're not alone. And if this story is touching something real in you, Staying with it matters more than you think. Morning came without mercy. Hooper woke to the muted gray light of Geneva pressing through the thin hotel curtains. For a few seconds, he didn't remember where he was. Then the weight returned, slow, suffocating, undeniable. He sat up, rubbing his face, and noticed his phone on the bedside table. 3 missed calls. All from Jane. All after midnight. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. His first instinct was relief. His second was anger. His third, worse, was hope. Hooper swung his legs off the bed and stood. He needed movement. Stillness made room for doubt. By the time he showered and dressed, his phone buzzed again. Jane. This time, he answered. Hooper, she said immediately, breathless, like she'd been holding it all night. Please don't hang up. I won't, he said evenly. But I'm not coming back. Silence crackled between them. I need to see you, she said. Just once. Please. No, he replied, too quickly. There was a pause, then her voice shifted. Lower. Controlled. The voice she used in negotiations. I have a site inspection today, she said. An infrastructure redevelopment on the East Bank. You're the restoration architect assigned. Hooper froze. What? I didn't know it was you, she said quickly. I swear. The firm subcontracted independently. I only found out when your name came across my tablet this morning. Hooper closed his eyes. Of course. His work, saving old structures governments wanted to erase, had brought him here long before Jane ever had. You don't have to come, Jane added softly. Yes, I do, he said. They both knew why. The site sat just outside the city center, a half-collapsed historic bridge and adjoining cathedral ruins slated for redevelopment into a cultural hub. Old stone met modern steel. Memory fighting momentum. Hooper arrived early, clipboard in hand, heart braced. When Jane stepped out of the black sedan, everything in him tightened. She looked smaller in daylight. Not diminished, just human. Her tailored coat hung open, hair pulled back hastily, dark circles beneath eyes that had once only known ambition. Their eyes met. Neither smiled. Good morning, she said, professional, careful. Jane, he replied, just as controlled. They stood side by side as officials spoke, nodding when expected, pretending this was just another meeting. But proximity is a liar's enemy. Hooper could feel her, every shift of weight, every breath. He caught the faint scent of her perfume and hated how instinctively his body remembered it. Jane tried not to look at him. Tried not to remember how safe it once felt to stand this close without armor. At one point, an official gestured toward a cracked stone arch. We'll need your assessment, he said to Hooper. Ms. Vale, you'll want to hear this. They walked together beneath the arch. Stone dust drifted down softly. Hooper reached out instinctively, steadying Jane when her heel caught on uneven ground. Their hands touched. Jane inhaled sharply. Hooper pulled back immediately. I'm sorry, he said. No, she replied. Don't be. Their eyes locked. Everything unsaid pressed between them. Later, as the group dispersed, rain began to fall, sudden, heavy. The others retreated to vehicles. Jane and Hooper were left beneath the arch, rain blurring the world beyond. You didn't read my messages, Jane said quietly. I couldn't, Hooper replied. If I did, I wouldn't be standing here. I deserved that, she said. Yes, he agreed. Then softer, but I still wish you hadn't. Jane swallowed. I didn't plan to hurt you, she said. I didn't wake up one day and decide to replace you. Hooper looked at the ancient stone above them. You didn't replace me, he said. You just stopped choosing me. Her eyes filled. I was drowning, she whispered. And you were so strong. I thought you didn't need me anymore. That was the mistake, he said. I needed you to come back. Not succeed alone. Rain fell harder. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jane asked, barely audible, Is there any chance you'll stay long enough to finish this project? Hooper hesitated. Yes, he said finally. I owe the building that much. Jane nodded, heart pounding. And maybe, she thought, I owe us that too. If you're still here, feeling the tension instead of rushing to judgment, maybe you understand how complicated love really is. Staying with this story isn't passive, it's choosing to see the truth. The rain stopped sometime after noon, leaving the construction site slick and gleaming. The stones darkened as if memory itself had soaked through them. Hooper stayed. Not because he wanted proximity, but because leaving would have meant pretending none of this mattered. He spent the afternoon inspecting the cathedral ruins alone, running his hands over ancient stone, mapping fractures that told stories no one bothered to read anymore. This was the work he loved. Damage with context. Breaks with history. As dusk crept in, he noticed Jane standing at the far end of the site, coat folded over her arm, heels in her hand. She looked smaller without her armor. Not the Jane Vale the world knew, just a woman staring at something she didn't know how to fix. "You always did this," she said quietly, approaching him. "Touch things like they're alive." "They are," Hooper replied. "If you listen long enough." She smiled faintly. "It didn't last. I asked the team to clear out early," she said. "I thought, maybe we should talk. Somewhere that isn't pretending." Hooper hesitated, then nodded. They ended up inside the skeletal remains of the cathedral. No roof, broken arches, open sky. The air smelled of damp stone and dust. Time hovered there, unclaimed. Jane sat on a fallen pillar, smoothing her skirt, gathering courage like a resource she'd almost depleted. "There's something I never told you," she began. Hooper stayed silent. Jane looked up at the open sky. "When I was 22, before you, I worked under a man who taught me everything about power," she said. "He praised me, promoted me, took credit for my ideas." Hooper's jaw tightened. "One night," she continued, voice steady but eyes glassy, "he told me I owed him. That success wasn't free." Hooper's breath stilled. "I walked out," Jane said. "I didn't report it. I didn't fight it. I just disappeared. And I promised myself I'd never be vulnerable like that again." She finally looked at him. "When I started succeeding, really succeeding, I felt safe. Untouchable. And when I started feeling lonely," she swallowed, "I panicked." Hooper sat beside her slowly. "Lucien wasn't power," she said. "He was distraction. Control without intimacy. Someone I didn't have to let all the way in." Hooper stared at the stone floor. "So you closed the door on the one person who already was," he said quietly. Jane nodded. "I didn't think I was losing you," she whispered. "I thought you were strong enough to wait." Hooper laughed softly, not cruelly, just tired. "I'm not stone," he said. "I just work with it." Silence fell between them, heavy but honest. Jane reached into her bag and pulled out the stone fragment he'd given her. "I carried this with me all day," she said. "It felt heavier than it should." "That's history," Hooper replied. "It weighs what it's worth." She held it out to him. "I don't know if I can fix what I broke," she said. "But I need you to know, this wasn't about replacing you. It was about me being terrified of needing you again." Hooper didn't take the stone. Instead, he placed his hand over hers. "I needed you to choose me," he said. "Even when it cost you something." Jane's tears finally fell. "I don't know how to be soft and powerful at the same time," she confessed. Hooper squeezed her hand gently. "Then learn," he said. "Like everything else." They sat there until the sky darkened completely. Not reconciled. Not broken. Just exposed. And for the first time since Geneva, the truth stood between them, unarmored, undeniable. They didn't touch again that night. Not because the want wasn't there, but because something more fragile had taken its place. Understanding. Hooper walked Jane back to her car beneath the soft yellow lights lining the site road. The air smelled clean after rain, like the world had been rinsed of yesterday's mistakes. They stopped beside the open door, neither in a hurry to end the moment. "I booked a small apartment near the site," Jane said, staring at the steering wheel. "I didn't want the penthouse anymore. It felt dishonest." Hooper nodded. "I'm staying in a modest hotel across the river." "I know," she said. "I checked." He raised an eyebrow. She smiled weakly. "Old habits," she said. A silence settled, not awkward. "Just careful. Will you have dinner with me?" Jane asked finally. Not as a negotiation. Not as anything other than two people who used to know each other very well. Hooper considered it. Yes, he said. But only if we talk about something normal. She laughed softly. Deal. They chose a small restaurant tucked away from the city center. No glass walls. No executives. Just wooden tables, candlelight, and the hum of ordinary lives continuing without them. Jane ordered soup. Hooper ordered pasta. They shared bread without thinking about it. For the first time in months, they didn't talk about work. They talked about small things. A stray cat Hooper had been feeding near the site, barista Jane missed back home, terrible movie they once watched on repeat because it reminded them of being broke and happy. Jane laughed, really laughed, and then stopped suddenly, hand over her mouth. I forgot what this feels like, she said. Like breathing, Hooper replied. Her eyes softened. Later, they walked along the river, coats pulled tight against the night breeze. Jane slowed her steps unconsciously to match his. I was always afraid you'd resent me, she admitted. That one day you'd look at me and only see what I cost you. Hooper stopped walking. I never resented your success, he said. I resented your absence. Jane closed her eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. Of slowing down. Of choosing us and losing everything else. Hooper took a breath. Love isn't a trade, he said. It's a decision you keep making, even when it's inconvenient. She nodded, tears shimmering. They reached the bridge where the river widened and paused, leaning against the railing just like strangers might, careful not to lean too close. Jane turned to him. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. If I try, really try, will you meet me halfway? Hooper didn't answer immediately. Yes, he said finally. But halfway means you walk too. She smiled through tears. They didn't kiss. They didn't promise forever. But as they stood there, shoulders brushing lightly, something settled between them, quiet, warm, alive. Hope. If this moment feels gentle but dangerous to you, if it reminds you how close healing can feel before everything breaks, stay. And if you believe stories about rebuilding deserve to be told, staying with this one matters more than you think. It didn't break all at once. It cracked quietly, like stone under pressure, invisible until it finally gives. The next morning, Hooper arrived at the site earlier than usual. He needed the solitude. The fragile peace from the night before still lived in his chest, and he didn't trust it yet. Peace, he'd learned, was the most delicate thing of all. He was reviewing structural diagrams when voices drifted across the site. Jane's voice. Tight. Controlled. Then another. Lucien. Hooper didn't look up at first. He told himself it was coincidence. Geneva was full of people who crossed paths without meaning to. But then he heard his own name. You can't seriously be reconsidering everything because of him, Lucien said. Jane, you're in the middle of the biggest expansion of your career. Hooper froze. Jane's reply came sharp. Don't talk about him like that. I'm being realistic, Lucien countered. He doesn't belong in this world. You know that. Hooper's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Jane exhaled slowly. This world nearly destroyed me. That's dramatic, Lucien said lightly. You were thriving when we met. Hooper finally looked up. Jane stood a few meters away, back straight, jaw set. Lucien stood too close. Familiar again. Hooper stepped into view. The conversation died instantly. Jane's face drained of color. Hooper, she said. I didn't know you were here yet. I was, he replied evenly. Long enough. Lucien cleared his throat. I was just leaving. No, Jane said suddenly. Stay. The word hit Hooper like a slap. Jane turned to him quickly. Not like that. This isn't. Hooper held up a hand. It's fine, he said. You don't owe me explanations in front of him. Lucien's gaze flicked between them. For what it's worth, he said to Hooper, this isn't about you. It's about compatibility. Hooper smiled faintly. No, he said. It's about choice. Jane stepped forward. Hooper, please. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not at the woman who'd laughed with him by the river. Not at the one who'd cried in the cathedral ruins. But at the one who couldn't let go of the very thing that had pulled her away in the first place. You asked me to meet you halfway, Hooper said quietly. I did. Jane's eyes filled. I'm trying. Trying isn't choosing, he replied. Lucian shifted uncomfortably. Jane, we're late for. Stop, she snapped. Hooper shook his head. This is what I was afraid of, he said. That every time things get hard, you'll reach for momentum instead of meaning. That's not fair, Jane said, voice breaking. You don't know what's at stake. I know exactly what's at stake, Hooper said. It's us. And you keep putting it second. Silence spread across the site, heavy and public. Jane whispered, I can't just walk away from everything. Hooper nodded. And I can't keep standing in the doorway of your life, he said. Waiting to be invited in. Her breath hitched. I never asked you to wait, she said. No, he agreed softly. You just made it the only way to love you. That was the moment something in Jane broke. I'm doing my best, she cried. Why isn't that enough? Hooper's eyes shone, but his voice stayed steady. Because love isn't measured by effort, he said. It's measured by presence. Lucian took a step back. I think I should go, he muttered. Jane didn't stop him this time. When Lucian disappeared from sight, the space between Hooper and Jane felt enormous. I love you, Jane said desperately. Doesn't that count for anything? Hooper closed his eyes. It counts, he said. That's why this hurts. He picked up his folder, his hands calm despite the storm inside him. I'm stepping away, he said. Not to punish you. Not to force a choice. Jane's heart raced. Then why? Because if you choose me, he said, it has to be without an audience. Without alternatives. Without fear. She reached for him. He stepped back. I can't be the thing you come back to when everything else quiets down, he said. I need to be the thing you choose even when it doesn't. Jane sank onto a stone bench, shaking. Hooper, please don't do this. He looked at her one last time. I already did, he said gently. And then he walked away. Jane stayed there long after he was gone, realization crashing over her in brutal waves. She hadn't lost him because she loved him too little. She'd lost him because she never made him first. Jane Vale had never been afraid of empty rooms. She built her life inside them, corner offices before dawn, hotel suites after midnight, conference halls echoing with applause that faded the moment she left. Silence was familiar. Manageable. But this silence was different. This one accused. The site cleared out by late afternoon, leaving the skeletal cathedral ruins exposed to the sky. Jane stayed behind, sitting on the same stone bench where Hooper had left her. The air felt heavier without him, like the place itself knew something essential had been removed. She replayed his words again and again. Trying isn't choosing. Presence is the measure. Without an audience. Without alternatives. For the first time in years, Jane didn't reach for her phone. No emails, no calls, and no distractions disguised as responsibility. Just her. She walked the perimeter of the site slowly, heels crunching over gravel, fingers brushing the ancient stone Hooper had studied with such care. She imagined him working alone in forgotten places, restoring what others abandoned. Loving the same way. And she understood, too late, painfully clearly, that she had treated their marriage like an old building, meaningful, beautiful, but always waiting. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Lucian. She stared at the name until it stopped feeling like a threat and started feeling like a choice. She answered. Jane, Lucian said smoothly. I've been thinking. No, she interrupted. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. I need to say this before you finish. Silence. I can't do this anymore, she said. Not you. Not what we represented. I used you to stay busy so I wouldn't have to be brave. Lucian scoffed lightly. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Jane said. But it will finally be mine. She ended the call and blocked the number before doubt could rush in. Her hands trembled. Then stilled. That night, Jane returned to the penthouse one last time, not to stay, but to pack. She moved through the space without nostalgia, gathering only what mattered. At the bottom of her bag, she placed the stone fragment Hooper had given her. I thought you'd like something that lasted. She checked out before dawn and relocated to the small apartment near the site, the one she'd chosen because it felt honest. Sparse. Human. She didn't call Hooper. Not yet. Choice, she realized, wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It happened when no one was watching. 3 days passed. Hooper finished his preliminary work early and prepared to leave Geneva. He stood on the platform at the train station, ticket in hand, heart guarded. He had done what he said he would, stepped away to see what truth remained when waiting ended. Hooper. He turned. Jane stood a few steps away, coat pulled tight, eyes bare of armor. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," she said quickly. "I'm here to tell you who I am now." He didn't speak. "I resigned from the expansion deal," she continued. "Not the firm. Not my work. Just the part that demanded I disappear to prove my worth." Hooper's breath caught. "I don't know if that's enough," Jane said. "And I won't ask you to forgive me. I just needed you to know, I chose differently. Even if it costs me." Silence stretched. Hooper studied her, not for polish, not for promise, but for truth. "You did this without knowing if I'd be here," he said. "Yes," she replied. "That's the point." The station announcement echoed overhead. Hooper exhaled slowly. "Choice," he said. "Real choice. Takes time to prove." "I know," Jane whispered. "I'm ready." He looked down at the ticket in his hand. Then folded it once. If you've ever stood at the edge of losing someone you love, wondering if change would come too late, this moment is for you. And if you believe people can still choose differently, staying with this story is a choice too. The train left without Hooper. It slid out of the station with a low metallic sigh, carrying strangers and destinations that no longer belonged to him. He stood on the platform long after it disappeared, the folded ticket still warm in his palm. Jane didn't move. She didn't reach for him. Didn't fill the silence with promises. Didn't ask him to decide faster. She stood there as herself, unarmored, uncertain, present. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. Hooper finally turned to her. "Come with me," he said, not as a command, not as a test. Not back home. Just walk. They left the station together and followed the river as the city woke around them. Morning light skimmed the water, turning it silver. Vendors opened shutters. Cyclists passed. Life, ordinary and miraculous, went on. "I used to think love was patience," Hooper said after a while. "That if I waited long enough, things would come back to me." Jane listened, eyes fixed on the river. "And now?" she asked. "Now I think love is choosing the same person when waiting stops being an option." Jane swallowed. "I can't promise I won't be afraid again," she said. "Or that ambition won't pull at me." He nodded. "I can't promise I won't need reassurance. Or closeness. Or time." They stopped near the old bridge, the one he'd been sent to save. Morning sun lit the stone, revealing fractures that looked worse in daylight than they had at dusk. Hooper set his hand against the surface. "This bridge didn't collapse because it was weak," he said. "It failed because no one maintained it. Everyone assumed it would just hold." Jane stepped beside him. "Will it?" "Yes," he said. "If it's cared for." She reached into her coat and placed the stone fragment back into his hand. "I kept it because it reminded me that lasting things don't beg for attention," she said. "They just need presence." Hooper closed his fingers around it. "Jane," he said quietly, "I'm not coming back to the marriage we had." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I'm asking you to build a new one," he continued. Slower. Messier. Honest. Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "Yes," she said. "Choose me when it's inconvenient. Call me back when I disappear. And if I forget again." "I won't wait silently," he said. She nodded. "Good." They stood there, the river moving steadily beside them, the city rising behind them, the past no longer chasing their heels. Jane leaned her forehead against his chest. For the first time since Geneva, Hooper held her, fully, firmly, without fear of interruption. "I love you," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "I know how to stay now," he replied. "If you do." She smiled through tears. "I do." Weeks later, the bridge reopened. Not with fanfare, but with quiet pride. Jane stood in the crowd without cameras, hands in her pockets, watching Hooper explain the restoration to a small group of engineers. When he caught her eye, he smiled, unhurried, certain. Love didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with maintenance. With return. With the courage to choose again. And this time they did. If this ending felt earned, if you believe love isn't about grand gestures but the courage to come back, carry that with you. Stories like this survive because people who feel them choose to stay.
Thank you for staying with this story to the very end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you'll not miss out on the next video.